38 years ago, Donald Trump pointed at a map and said, "Destroy that island," and Iran bleeds out. Yesterday, it happened. In 1988, Trump, a real estate developer with no security clearance, no classified briefings, no access to Pentagon war rooms, sat across from a British journalist and explained, with surgical simplicity, how you end Iran's power. You go after Kharg Island, the island that processes 90% of Iran's crude oil exports, the island that every president since Carter has stared at on a targeting map and quietly put back in the drawer. Because the political cost of pulling the trigger was always too high. The oil price shock, the global fallout, the ally blowback, the headlines. Too much, every single time, until yesterday. In the early hours of May 16th, 2026, CENTCOM executed what Trump himself described as one of the most powerful bombing raids in the history of the Middle East. Every military installation on Kharg Island, missile sites, IRGC command facilities, mining operations, defensive structures, destroyed simultaneously, not damaged, not degraded, gone. If you want to understand what comes next, and what the next 14 days mean for global oil, nuclear weapons, and a Marine force currently crossing the Pacific, stay with me. And if this kind of real-time strategic analysis is what you need, subscribe now, because the next chapter of this story lands in 2 weeks. Kharg Island is not an oil field. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in this story. The oil doesn't come from Kharg. It flows in from the Iranian mainland through pipelines, and Kharg is where it gets loaded onto the supertankers that carry it to the world. Those tankers, called very large crude carriers, can haul up to 85 million gallons per shipment. They cannot load with that efficiency anywhere else in Iranian territorial waters. The channel depths, the mooring systems, the offshore loading berths, decades of infrastructure engineering, all built around one island, which means 90% of Iran's crude oil revenue, 90% of the financial engine of the IRGC's proxy network, every weapons procurement budget, every militia payroll from Beirut to Baghdad, every domestic crackdown the Revolutionary Guard funds, it all flows through a single terminal. And the IRGC knew it. So they built it into a fortress. Missile batteries, naval mining operations, air defense installations, command and control facilities, all of it designed around one strategic assumption: that no American president would ever authorize a strike on an island this economically entangled with global energy markets, because the oil price shock alone would fall on America's allies, America's consumers, and American approval ratings simultaneously. Trump dismantled that assumption before pulling the trigger. The blockade that began April 13th had already removed Iranian oil from the global supply equation. The UAE's withdrawal from OPEC and the activation of the Fujairah pipeline had already partially filled the gap. Saudi Arabia's east-west pipeline was moving 7 million barrels a day through to Yanbu. The conditions that made every previous president decline, the oil shock risk, the ally blowback, the economic fallout, had been systematically reduced in the preceding weeks. Not eliminated, reduced enough. And Trump calculated that the window had opened. So CENTCOM executed it. The strike itself is not the most consequential thing that happened on May 16th. This sentence is, if Iran interferes with free passage through the Strait of Hormuz, the decision to spare Iranian oil infrastructure will be reconsidered. Read it again slowly. Because what Trump spared, the loading berths, the oil depots, the pumping stations, the pipelines, is not protected. It is conditionally protected. The military installations are gone. The economic infrastructure is still standing, held at risk by a single sentence, a targeting authorization sequence dressed in diplomatic language. Phase 1, destroy what defends the oil. Phase 2, conditional, destroy the oil itself. Destroying missile sites can be recovered from. You can rebuild a missile battery in months. Destroying Kharg Island's oil loading infrastructure, the depots, the berths, the mooring systems, is a different calculation entirely. That infrastructure represents decades of engineering and billions of dollars of capital investment. Destroying it doesn't degrade Iran's oil exports for a year. It restructures Iranian economic reality for a decade. Every IRGC planner monitoring American public statements understood what that sentence meant the moment it was published. The question is whether the Iranian command structure, at its current level of coherent decision-making, is capable of responding with the strategic discipline the difference between those two phases requires. There is a Marine Expeditionary Unit aboard the USS Tripoli, currently transiting from Japan to the Middle East, 10 to 14 days from the theater. 5,000 combat-ready personnel, half Marines, half sailors, specifically organized for sea-based forced entry operations. The mainstream analysis of that deployment focuses on what it cannot do. It cannot occupy Iran. It cannot sustain a land campaign against a nation of 90 million. Both things are true. Both things are also irrelevant to what the force is actually built for. An amphibious assault on an island whose defensive military installations have just been destroyed does not require a force capable of occupying a nation. It requires a force capable of arriving from the sea, establishing a perimeter, securing a target, and leaving before a coherent counterattack can be organized. That is precisely what a Marine Expeditionary Unit is designed to do. And there is a second possible mission. The Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, when asked directly about Iran's 440 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, enough for multiple nuclear devices, distributed across at least 2 hardened locations, did not say the administration would destroy it. He did not say the administration would negotiate for it. He said, using specific and deliberate language, "We have options up to and including taking them, physically securing, extracting, and removing the enriched uranium stockpile that Iran refused to surrender in negotiations." That mission requires ground forces that can secure a location, manage the material with the handling protocols enriched uranium demands, and extract it to a controlled site before the window closes. A Marine Expeditionary Unit with Special Operations support is exactly that force structure. Operation Midnight Hammer's B-2 strikes degraded the enrichment facilities, but the material already enriched survived because it was distributed and hardened. The facilities are gone. The material exists. The Marines are en route. The Defense Secretary's phrasing was not an accident. Iran's military communicated after the Kharg strikes that any attack on its oil infrastructure would trigger retaliatory strikes on energy infrastructure across the Gulf region. Saudi refineries, Qatari facilities, Bahraini oil depots. The problem with that threat is that Iran has already been executing it for weeks, and whatever level its remaining strike capacity allows. And the trend line is not moving in Iran's favor. The Defense Secretary noted it explicitly. Every day brings fewer Iranian missile launches, fewer Iranian drone strikes. The IRGC entered this conflict with significant ballistic missile inventory, thousands of drones, and a coastal defense architecture built over decades. That inventory is being consumed faster than a blockade-impaired supply chain can replace it. The Kharg strikes accelerated that attrition. Eliminating the island's missile sites removes launch capacity from the exact positions that would have been used to interdict an amphibious approach. That is not incidental. That is operational preparation. And then there is what Iran did to Oman. Oman hosts no American military bases. Oman has been playing the role it has played in every Gulf crisis of the past 4 decades. The quiet back channel. The discreet mediator keeping communication lines open between Washington and Tehran. The diplomatic off-ramp that both sides maintain precisely because it preserves the possibility of a negotiated exit. Iran struck Oman, attacked the one country providing the communication channel that could produce a negotiated outcome before a Marine Expeditionary Unit is ordered to take Kharg Island. You don't attack your own mediator if you are a military structure capable of coherent strategic calculation. You attack your own mediator when you are an organization that has lost the institutional capacity to distinguish between tactical aggression and strategic self-destruction. That is the Iranian military's decision-making quality on May 16th. The USS Tripoli departed Japan. That is a fact. The military installations on Kharg Island were destroyed on May 16th. That is a fact. The defense secretary described options up to and including the physical removal of Iran's enriched uranium. That is a fact. The administration has, across 77 days of this conflict, assembled every capability it subsequently used before using it. They moved the USS Truxtun and USS Mason into the strait. The ships crossed. They requested Dark Eagle hypersonic missile deployment. The deployment proceeded. They assembled the Marine Expeditionary Unit. It is transiting now. Capability assembly in this conflict has not been demonstration. It has been preparation. The Kharg Island strikes destroyed what defends the oil. The conditional warning placed the oil itself under targeting authorization. The Marines are 10 to 14 days from theater. The enriched uranium is in known locations. The pattern across 77 days is consistent. What is assembled gets used. The IRGC built its entire strategic theory on one assumption, that the American president would stop short of the decisions no previous president had made. Carter stopped. Reagan stopped. Every administration since stopped. The hardest option was taken yesterday. And the man who named the target in 1988 with no classified briefings and no military background is the man who directed the strike 38 years later. What happens in the next 14 days will determine whether the conditional warning becomes an execution order, whether Marines land on Kharg, and whether 440 kilograms of enriched uranium changes hands. Drop your prediction in the comments right now. Does the USS Tripoli execute an amphibious landing on Kharg Island? Yes or no? Subscribe and turn on notifications, because when that ship arrives, this story moves faster than any headline can track, and you'll want to be here when it does.